Hi there. Here is a very interesting topic. Even when the night falls, businesses keep on booming. Local governments across China are rolling out measures to stimulate nighttime economy by encouraging later closing hours at shopping malls and restaurants and reinventing cultural and entertainment activities. The nighttime economy is set to boost consumption amid the downward economic pressure. So how big is the market potential? What are the challenges in developing a vibrant nighttime economy? And what inspirations can local governments draw from the U.S. and European cities, and even from the neighboring country of Singapore? To answer these questions and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Jiang Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and Anna Tangen, current affairs commentator. Via satellite, we shall also talk to Robert Kapp, director of the Economist Corporate Network in Hong Kong. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to Dialogue. As I said earlier in the opening remarks, many cities across the country, such as Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu, started to roll out measures in boosting nighttime consumption. First of all, your definition about nighttime economy, is this a novel idea?
No, it's not a novel idea. It's not new. I mean, it's been around for many, many years in big cities in the West, for example, New York City, San Francisco, and also some other cities in the European continent. Nighttime economy is very common. According to my opinion, nighttime really means it's like from 9 o'clock up until like 3 a.m. in the morning. This is probably the most vibrant time during the night. People come out, they drink, eat, entertainment.
But don't you think such late-hour business activities will threaten to violate the labor law? Europeans, they enjoy a comfortable life, and if they were to be required to work, late at night, that will be a violation of the labor law.
Well, first of all, I think in certain parts of Europe, in Southern Europe, for example, people go after work very late into the night, and then they go out and eat and do all kinds of things. And the time to go to office in the morning is quite late as well. I mean, it's like around 9 o'clock. I think this is something we can do as well.
And are you surprised that for Greeks in particular, the real life won't start until 10 or 11 p.m. every day?
That's what I'm talking
well,
about.
it's not only Greece. I mean, in Italy and Spain,
right.
Almost all the Mediterranean countries. It's only as you go further north that you discover that people everything closes up around 7 or 8. But most large cities, just because of the density, because of the need to make money, because the shopkeepers, the amount of rent you pay is the same, whether you're running it 24 hours or 1. So there's a lot of fixed overheads that companies, businesses have, and if they can utilize it, that's good. I actually did a nighttime entertainment district in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was very successful. But a lot of it depends on urban planning.
Right.
On the ability
Were you a DJ in a nightclub?
No, I skipped that. I was a lawyer. I was a government
New
official,
Orleans,
but I didn't.
For example, playing jazz.
Yeah, New Orleans.
Well, New Orleans, they also out very late. There's the big easy culture, especially in areas where it's very hot during the day. You'll see a lot more people active in the evening.
And also want to point out one thing is that usually you need some kind of people living in downtown. I think this is very critical.
That's urban planning.
Exactly. I mean, it's not just people coming here and dine, wine for entertainment. I think there are certain people who have to live in downtown area, and I think that's the basis for creating a nighttime economy.
And that is so important.
Right, and and this is very common here in China, so we have this advantage actually.
At the same time, I'm wondering aloud, Robert, if your Cantonese has improved remarkably to help you enjoy the nightlife in Hong Kong. By the way, what do you think of the broad backdrop against which these policies are being rolled out in different cities of the mainland to help fix the problem of jobs and to create more job opportunities for those, particularly those with no skills?
Yeah, I think actually it's a kind of necessary move. In most other economies of the world, of course, where you don't have as much government involvement, it tends to emerge organically. Of course, the allocation, like you see, especially in Europe, where there tends to be curfew, or not so much curfew hours, but more the restrictions. Like in the UK previously, it wasn't that long ago, you couldn't open stores on a Sunday. So anyway, over time, you'll see governments relinquish on that. But generally speaking, a nightlife emerges organically as more and more people want to go out. What's interesting in China's case is it's actually an active government policy where they're trying to encourage more businesses to have later hours. And that is something that, when you look at it from an economic perspective, makes a lot of sense. If only for the additional productivity you then start getting out of everything from a building to indeed the entire landscape of a city where you are now allowing more economic activity to take place. So it makes a lot of economic sense, and it usually happens over time anyway. What's unique about China, though, is you have a government push at both the national and local level.
And we were talking about the creation of jobs for the low-end labor force, quote-unquote, those with poor or no skills to find a good job in the major city, either in Hong Kong or the Chinese mainland. But what is the situation in the United States? Do we have similar needs and needs of urgency for the blue-collar workers these days? Because, following the outsourcing of jobs, quote-unquote, from the United States by low-income economies in East Asia in particular, creation of jobs remains a top issue on the agenda of President Trump.
Well, currently unemployment is at an all-time low, but people are they're not very happy about doing that. And quite frankly, the kind of small opportunities to run a food truck or to have an open stand like you have in Singapore, Taipei, even parts of Beijing, and especially the old days. Remember all the carts that used to be around where you could get food? They don't have that. Everything's been kind of McDonaldized. They're all franchises. They kind of cover through the whole night. So I don't think it's really comparable. If you look at places like Great Britain and things like that, London, 6% of their economy is from the night entertainment. But you're thinking perhaps about it the wrong way. This is not about clubs and karaokes and discos and things like that. When you're trying to create a nighttime economy, you're doing something different. Yes, it is about dining, but other opportunities. Millennials in particular are looking for experiences. They're not looking for, another massage or something like that. They're looking for something, well, not just shopping. They can do shopping on the weekends and things like that. No, actually what they're going out is to be with other people. It's a social opportunity, an opportunity to blow off steam, to get together with other young people. Look at the number of people who are looking for mates to get married, but they have to get to know each other. The workplace isn't necessarily conducive to that. So there's a lot of experiential things that are working very well.
Yeah, sorry for barking at the wrong tree. When we look at the ambiguity concerning nightlife or night economy, particularly in northern China, John, do we have any regional differences between the north and south when it comes to nightlife?
Absolutely, absolutely. We know this too well. I came from the south. Like in Shanghai, just look at the public transportation. I think in this city, in Beijing, for example, after 11 o'clock, public transportation is pretty much off. Whereas in cities in Shenzhen, in Guangzhou, and Shanghai, for example, all these things are still available until very late into the night. I think it's more of a mentality difference here. And this difference goes back many years. When I was a college student in the 1980s, it was like that in Beijing. We have to scramble for bus after 9 o'clock. So I think this mentality has to change. It's not just about people coming. There's also have to be certain public service available. For example, as I mentioned, transportation is one thing. Public security, cleaning service, all these things have to be available at night, and these things are provided by the city government. So the city government has to pitch in and to provide these things.
They've already had plans to extend the hours of line 1 and 2.
Okay, that I don't know.
Okay. And they're also extending the bus services until 2 a.m. This will be a great help, but there's a whole bunch of things that go into it. It's not just city urban planning. People want to socialize in their neighborhood. They don't want to take a half-hour bus ride or a subway ride to where they're going to entertain. They want to be in their local neighborhoods. One of the problems that Beijing and large cities face in China is they tend to have blocks and blocks of residential, and then you have other areas where you have the business and other areas where you have entertainment. You have restaurant streets where there'll be literally 100, 200 restaurants on one street. But that's not necessarily conducive to the kind of local nightlife things that you have. You can, of course, have beacons, things that actually attract people at night. For instance, if you go to 798 in the evening, it's very quiet. But the opportunity exists to extend 7998 into the evening. But you would have to have a program. There has to be somebody who's organizing this, saying, look, we're going to make the effort, we're going to have the restaurant. They already have the restaurants. The question is getting the galleries to recognize.
Robert, perhaps we have been talking smart about the change in the lifestyle of the middle class in urban areas. However, the past 4 decades saw the rise in living standards of migrant workers in their millions. These guys come to the prosperous urban areas to seek jobs, but they could only find jobs that don't necessarily require skills. However, a couple of years ago, in some cities of the Chinese mainland, some controversial things happened because these so-called low-end labor force were ousted. They were forced to leave the cities, not the way President Trump was yelling to the 4 congressional women in the United States, go back to where you were. But these low-end labor force were asked to leave. At the same time, urban dwellers complain bitterly about having this kind of a labor force deficit, and they need badly to enjoy the service that could only be provided by those with no skills when night falls. What do you think of this very controversial issue that captured the headlines for not only traditional media, but social media in particular?
Well, you're quite right in the sense of what happened a few years ago, and it created huge disruptions for economies like Beijing, where I think it was most noted. Of course, the workers weren't only in nightlife related services, but quite a few you would think would have been, because they would have been, as you described, the migrant workers who are typically, in terms of a nighttime activity, they would be restaurant workers or working at KTVs, you know, massage places, that sort of stuff. Where those sorts of jobs that also the local Beijingers, in the case of Beijing, or you know, those of other major metropolitan areas, the local citizens don't want to do. And it would make an impact when you disrupt those people, you send them home, as it were, of course, in all parts of the economy, not just at night, but in other areas where indeed you also require manual or more lowly skilled labor to make those activities and services available. So in terms of my thoughts on it, I personally don't think that was handled in the best of ways, and as you point out, social media, it sounded pretty much agreed with that. At the same time, the government officials did have a point in saying you had often unsanitary living conditions, and often you also have people who not only, I mean, this whole thing with the hukou system, as it's called, the household registration system in China, is very complex. So it's somewhat akin to illegal labor in more developed nations where the people aren't properly documented, and therefore they're not given a real way to improve their lot in the economy. I mean, I myself, having worked in a service position, including doing night shifts at a restaurant, a hamburger stand actually, in my youth, can attest to the fact I didn't want to be doing that for a long time, and I could move on. And if you don't give people documentation in a city, it's hard to do that. So it's a big controversy, and hopefully as China now explores the night economy, they'll find a way to balance that out, that they will value the lower end labor that goes into that and find a way to bring all parts of the labor force into that component of the overall economy.
Thank you so much. And what do you want to say about, for example, regional differences? Latest survey of a business network shows that only 3 northern cities, Beijing, Qingdao, and Xi'an, are on the top 20 list. How do you look at such a regional disparity?
Oh, you mean in the north versus the south? The northern cities, the ones that have been successful at this, Beijing succeeds because of the density. You have so many people here, so many young people who are literally attracted by the lights and power of Beijing. They come here to make their future, also perhaps to meet somebody to fall in love with. So they're anxious to do something. They work very hard, long hours, but they're also craving not going back to a room where they share, you know, something, a room with 4 other people on a kind of dorm-like situation. They want to get out, do something interesting. But when you talk about nighttime economy, you should also be talking about education. The fact is, there's a shortage of workers in Beijing, especially in areas helping the elderly, in hospitality, especially hotels and restaurants. Very, very difficult. Talk to a restaurateur or a hotel thing. So there are opportunities not only just to say these are poor, uneducated people, but to educate them, bring their skills up so that they can fulfill part of the economy.
Perhaps by releasing policies that may benefit night consumption, government officials in different places of the country may have ignored the brutal fact that more low-income people in these cities are considering going back to their hometowns because they are scared by the rising living costs in major metropolitan cities. Having said this, we are discussing the controversial issues concerning the agenda and the agenda setting of government officials in improving nightlife as a part of the campaign to boost domestic spending. We are joined here in the Beijing studio by John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and Anna Tang, current affairs commentator. And we are also talking to Robert Kapp on satellite. He is standing by in Hong Kong. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. John, I was asking Anna differences between Beijing, Qingdao, and Xi'an and the rest of the country in terms of attracting more tourists or consumers that may benefit from the nightlife with the release of such preferential policies encouraging night economy. But do you think it's because of the legacies, I mean the cultural legacies of these major cities, Beijing, Qingdao, and Xi'an, we have more tourists and therefore a more prosperous nightlife?
Yeah, that has, I think it's related. Certainly that's true to some extent.
We have the Forbidden City in Beijing. However, debates broke out a few months ago when the Lantern Festival was held by lighting up the Forbidden City. Right. And that was very controversial. Were you surprised?
Well, we have to be, safe at first. I mean, that's for sure. Another reason I think probably has something to do with the weather. Really, if you ask ourselves on, say, January or February night, right? Do you want to go out at 1 o'clock in the morning? I mean, that's a tough question, right? So I think probably weather has something to do with that. And to address that, we need to some space where it's sort of indoor, where people can still go in there and spend a few hours, 2 or 3 hours, to meet people, to have some drinks, and have some entertainment. So I think that's also quite important. Right now, you don't find many places like that in this city in the winter, isn't it?
But to boost the night economy, you got to reconsider, for example, the disposable income for the younger generation. However, what worries me, I wonder if Robert has noticed that the younger generation, I mean those who were born in the 90s and even in the new millennium, start to spend all of their money, all of their salary each month, because they say, look, living costs are so high in a city like Beijing, it doesn't make any sense to save your money. However money you save, you won't buy a decent house, even within the Fifth Ring Road. Therefore, they spend everything. Do you think the issue of income redistribution or disposable income might be a serious issue for Premier Li Keqiang and his team as an important part of boosting the nightlife economy? What do you think of the prospects of creating more jobs in this year, a critical year of 2019, against the backdrop of a U.S.-China trade conflict?
Wow, so a lot of ideas there, but to unpack a couple of the ones that I think are interesting to tie together. One is disposable income actually overall in China is on the increase. Even with a slowing GDP, you continue to have enough growth and enough evolution up the value chain for China that more and more people are having disposable income. So that's a good factor. And that's also part of this, like I mentioned, organic growth, I think, underpinning the move towards a nighttime economy. On the other hand, you are quite correct to say that the cost of living, and I'm in one of the most expensive cities in the world here in Hong Kong, but Beijing and Shanghai are also up there as being extremely expensive. And then you have another interesting conundrum, and that is even with growing disposable income, if it's not enough to help you buy a home or so forth, that could be the sort of thing that would encourage you maybe to spend in a way that isn't considered in a traditional sense too responsible, because you're not saving, you're simply living for the present moment and spending on a lot of entertainment and perhaps non-necessary items. But that could, again, perversely be, if we're talking about the nighttime economy or similar. I mean, the nighttime economy, another way to think of it is it's the leisure economy. So people could be spending their money in leisure activities at the local city at night after working hours, or they could be saving that money for leisure activities, say traveling abroad. For a domestic economy, generally speaking, it's better if they're spending it at night locally. So, I mean, I think although there's some problems there that you referenced in your question, I would say overall the trend looks fairly encouraging. I don't know if that's going to give too many issues for the Premier specifically in how to address the problem with the youth and the nighttime economy, but there are a lot of interesting points for further consideration.
Obviously many more things could be done to improve nightlife and to boost the night economy. For example, whatever the adversity of our trade and economic performance, you'll find the Chinese restaurants always crowded or even overcrowded. There's always the constant boom of, you know, in Chinese CGTN, they elevate the sense of having nice food to heaven. I mean, this is a religious faith about enjoying food as an important part of Chinese culture. John and Anna, do you share the index of happiness for the ordinary folks here in the urban cities?
In China, we have a tradition of spending money and effort and energy on eating. I mean, look at the great innovations.
You talk about business over dinner.
Well, that's one thing. I think just people emphasize eating a lot here in China. It's part of our culture. I mean, look at the great innovations in our history. A lot of them have to do with eating, with food. So I think this is in our genes, our tradition. And also I think the part of GDP that is coming from the restaurant industry is very high compared to other countries. I did some study a long time ago. We don't have the statistics for whole China, but I remember for Guangdong province, over 10% of GDP is actually from the restaurants, whereas in the U.S. it's like 4%. So we spend double of that money on restaurants, on dining out, compared to developed countries. So I think even if the economy is even if it's not doing well, right now it's actually doing okay. Even if it's not doing well, I think still people are going to go out and eat.
Yeah, I mean, statistically though, it's because there's a differential in the amount of money that's involved here. When you're talking about the U.S. level of income, we're talking about 50,000.
I'm talking about percentage.
Yeah, percentage. But the whole point is, if I have more money, a smaller percent goes to food as a total.
Oh,
but
okay.
in terms of developing nightlife, it's not just about all of these things that we're talking about. In terms of creating jobs in that area, let's look at tourism. China sends the most number of tourists abroad every year. It's the #1 export of tourism worldwide. If there was an opportunity to do tourism within China, but what that would that require? That would mean that if you go to a city, you want to do something at night. So this should encourage Chinese cities to think about internal tourism, domestic tourism, and creating the amenities that are necessary. Hangzhou is beautiful during the day. It's a great place to walk around.
It's even more beautiful at night.
It is even more beautiful at night, but there's not much to do other than get a massage, all right, go to a karaoke, or have dinner. So if you want to create this environment where people stay at home, not to say don't go abroad, I'm just saying this is an opportunity to create more jobs.
But by the way, tourism, traveling abroad is actually imports of services.
It's imports.
So it's essentially a domestic substitution for imports.
I was just saying
money spent on domestically.
Robert, do you think the release of nightlife economic policies would benefit moviegoers and housewives who prefer to watch late night operas, I mean television dramas? What can you share with us about the nightlife in the United States, as you have millions of housewives and they prefer to watch soap operas and they cry and they punch their chest and cry and so what do you think of such an aspect of nightlife in the United States where we can draw inspirations, possibly?
Well, I should, in the fairness to my female compatriots, mention that men also watch soap operas and can be moved. I sometimes myself cry at films and so forth. I'm not a big soap opera fan, but I mean, I think to the gist of your question there, it's true, and I guess another interesting way to relate it is there's online. So if you look at a real big economic challenge in the United States for all sorts of retail outlets, it's not only during the night but also daytime, it's that so many people can do things online. And I think what's happening is, you mentioned entertainment media, so that's rather interesting, because what we've also seen is more and more people going towards theaters that provide value-added experiences. That can be everything from IMAX technology to enhance the viewing experience, or 3D, or seats that vibrate. I mean, these little enhancements that mean if you're not seeing it, not just because it's on the big screen, which can make a film viewing a lot more exciting, but you're actually getting something out of the venue itself. And that's the way a lot of stores are going. And the way you can relate that to the nighttime economy is by thinking, well, again, that's a way to get more use out of that store. A store typically doesn't get a lot of traffic during the daytime on a weekday. It gets the most traffic during the weekend. And if you can take those weekday period of time and extend it, so at night after people have been at work or study, and they can come and experience everything from a movie theater to stores. You see increasing attention put on design of stores in order to compete against online, to say, well, yes, you can buy this maybe even a little bit more cheaply online, but you can experience it and a whole range of other products that you maybe wouldn't otherwise pay attention to, or services for that matter, here in this built environment. So I think that's kind of the big challenge for consumption in economies, China as well as America's, and not just for the daytime but also the nighttime. It becomes even more important for the nighttime because of what I mentioned, trying to squeeze more value out of those built facilities that don't get a lot of use Monday through Friday.
John, what do you think of, say, e-commerce and the boom as such? For example, housewives who are called keyboard legends, 键盘侠, they would enjoy, the shopping spree and the price reduction when night falls, so that online buying, online commerce could be activated.
I think even with rapid growth of e-commerce, I think still there are people there, and people are still looking for some kind of a experience. I think the experience of shopping, experience of buying things, and experience of sitting there, enjoying life, still have a lot of room in people's life. And so I think in addition to the growth of this things delivered by UPS or FedEx, but still, people still would like to go to, as you said, I think, Times Square. I'm really impressed, right? Times Square used to be a quite a sleepy place.
Seedy place.
Yeah, but now it's totally transformed. I think this is a very good example.
It used to be a place for drugs and prostitution. The comics used to make jokes about it, the ones who were in New York.
Right.
Now it's a bustling, multi-million-dollar attraction for tens of millions of dollars attraction for New York City.
Yeah.
Public perceptions tend to be shaped by media reports such as gun-related violence, drugs and prostitution in some of the quarters of the world. However, in China, people enjoy law and order. They feel that China is one of the safest countries in the world. Does that guarantee more of the prosperous nightlife and night economy in China?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the necessary conditions. If the streets are not safe, people are not going to come out. So fortunately, we have very safe environment here in China, in urban cities, center, downtown areas of the city, and also we have people living in downtown areas. So hopefully, we're going to see a map of cities in China that never sleep.
Hopefully, tourists, Chinese and foreign alike, could enjoy that nightlife as they make contributions considerably to the rise of China's night economy as part of an effort to create more jobs. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.